Dr. Williams, thank you so much for joining me on Zoom and to talk about your leadership and stepping in as the new superintendent of the Buffalo School District. Congratulations on that as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
There is so much to tackle in the Buffalo City School District. What will be your key priority?
There is a lot. We are the second largest school district in New York State. And so while there's a lot, and while I'm, newly appointed, I am not new in the work. I am very familiar with the Buffalo Public Schools. I started as a student. I went through all of my years of schooling as a student and have always been around Buffalo Public Schools, even before I began working for the Buffalo Public Schools 32 years ago. And so I'm not really new in the work, although this is certainly a new level. But, this summer we started summer school. And even as the interim, we did a lot of planning to prepare for summer school because we wanted our summer schools to be safe and to be meaningful and productive. And so it entailed us working with our parents. That's one of the big ticket items that I intend to do as the superintendent is working very, very closely with our parents, listening to our parents, learning from our parents, and then sharing what our vision is and seeing how we can work together. That's going to be key. Making sure that our schools are safe. That's a big, big, big priority for me. And so for summer school, there were some things that I did, I think, that were a little different than have been done in the past. For instance, I was doing Sunday robocalls. I wanted our parents to hear, not from a voice that they don't know, but to hear from me what the expectations were as far as safety and security, what we were looking for in our summer school program, and sharing what the consequences would be if those things didn't happen. I want to be upfront. I want to be transparent with everyone. So I felt it was only fair to do that. And then, the first week of summer school, we didn't have any incidents of fighting or anything. That's unheard of. And I do believe it is attributed to me letting everybody know what we expected. The second week, because we had had such a great first week, I went back and did another call and thanked parents. And I'm not sure that they get a lot of thanks, but we appreciate them working with us in partnership. So the safety and security piece is huge. That second piece is the educational excellence. It's got to be every day in all of our schools. So, we started it this summer. We're going to continue to expand it in the fall.
What specifically did you say in that message that you changed that safety issue? What do you think made the difference of students not fighting within? And when you talk about school safety, you're talking right now about kind of that violence that erupts from within.
So I think the first piece is that, I've been trained in restorative practices. I've also been trained in trauma-informed care practices. And a part of that is letting everybody know what the expectations are. There are no I gotchas. There's no, you do something and then there's this consequence that you didn't know, you would incur if you engaged in that practice. So it was a matter of me letting them know, what I expected, that the children show up, that the children are on time, the children are listening to their teachers who are there to teach, that parents, if you need to come to the school, you're calling ahead of time. We've got security measures. All of our children in grades 7 through 12 experienced wanding. They all had to go through a security check. That's new. Our 7th and 8th graders have not had to do that. And certainly we've never had it where we did 100% of our students, but those are the times that we're in. I wanted our parents to know that so that the children wouldn't show up at school and wonder, what is this? I'm not doing this. It's for their safety and security. And it's a matter of connecting. It's a matter of connecting with parents and saying, I know I'm a parent, I'm a grandparent, that you want your children to return home the same way that they left home. You want them to return home safe, secure, and feeling good about whatever they've experienced with their day in school. And so the only way that we can do that is for us to have safety and security measures that are tight.
Given what occurred at McKinley last spring, how will you make those changes then for the school year so that you don't have, a shooting on campus and other, we've heard of other violence and fights that have involved teachers getting hurt, both at McKinley and some other of your high schools.
So that's very, that day, I think, over my entire 32 years, it was probably the darkest day that I've experienced. And at that time, I was a cabinet member, but it was unbelievable. I can remember everything about how I learned about it, the feelings, rushing to the scene, even though I knew, I wouldn't be able to do much there, but just feeling like I needed to be there. I needed to be there to try to help in any way that I could. And so, certainly, in any role that I play in the Buffalo schools, it was always my mission that we would do everything we could so that we would never, ever, ever experience anything like that again. So, there are some things that, we've done since then under my leadership. The first is that, we needed to increase the number of school security that we have in our schools so that, there's more opportunity for more coverage. And then there has to be training for the security officers so that relationships are established and so that, if there are things that are happening, in most cases, what we know is that children will tell someone if they hear something and it's unsettling, if they have trust with the person. So those are two big things that, we did. We also made sure that we ordered state-of-the-art walkie-talkies because we had some schools where it was difficult to for teachers to speak to one another in the case of something happening. So we had to make sure that our schools have a mechanism for communicating with one another. And so over the summer, we're working on some things. Now, COVID has created a little bit of difficulty because it's difficult now to get materials and resources in. Supply and demand, it seems like it's slowed down. But we certainly have plans just with some plant things that are in our schools to make sure that they're tightened up. We set in place some visitor mechanisms and informed our parents that, although we had just opened our schools up because, COVID numbers were decreasing, we had to go back to a system whereby we had to know who was coming to our schools and what the purpose was. So making sure cameras, all of those things are working. We've got visitor mechanisms, trainings, all of those things happened like right away.
Superintendent, I was out there that during that time of the shooting, and the parents were very upset, and they felt there was a lack of communication with the district, and they were, just standing out there with the rest of us. What lessons are learned from that, and how can you improve communications and maybe giving them a staging area if something like that ever happened again, where they could be, where they weren't just standing out there and waiting and wondering, they just felt really helpless.
Yeah, so I was out there too, you know, um, and again, I think that you think that you're prepared for something until something happens. And so certainly that was a lesson. That was a lesson for us that, we needed to shore up how parents are informed because what was happening is that children inside were texting parents, as much as they could, but, setting up reunification sites, ensuring that, there are regular messages that come out. Now, certainly when something like that happens, we're kind of at the mercy of the police department or whatever law enforcement entity has kind of taken control because they want to make sure that the messaging that goes out is the proper message that goes out, and we don't want to create more panic, but certainly we want to make sure that parents know that if the school is on a lockout or a lockdown, that the children are inside and that the children are safe. That's the big thing. that they want to make sure they know that their children are safe. And so we are working on all of those mechanisms and having some standardized so that we don't have to wait and have someone try to create a message, which takes time, but there are some standard messages that can go out very, very quickly if there is anything that happens, that's on an emergency basis in a school.
Dr. Cash was not always received very well and caused some negativity for the school district. There's not to say he didn't do some very good things. Graduation rates certainly improved. But would you say he left behind damage for the district that you have to now work toward revising and fixing up?
So I don't look at it as damage. I mean, I think different leaders have different styles. I think Dr. Cash did some good work. As you shared, the graduation rates improved. He brought us through a COVID crisis, that we'd never seen before. And so I think that, Dr. Cash did some very good work. I think as a leader, I'm a very different kind of leader. I'm from Buffalo and I've spent my whole career, with the Buffalo Public Schools, dedicating myself to the children and the families. And so there's something good to be said about that, I think. I know most all staff in the city of, within the Buffalo Public Schools, janitors, clerks, cafeteria workers, teachers, principals, assistant principals. And, not only that, I'm very accessible. I'm very, very accessible. So it's not unusual for me to be at Tops or at Wegmans, and to see parents and to engage in conversations. I'm very comfortable doing that. I also have a very servant leadership style in that I feel very, I feel very blessed to be in this position. I really do. And I think it comes from, the way that I was raised. And I was raised by two blue collar, parents. And so, I was taught that, you treat people the way that you want to be treated. And so, that's kind of who I am in that, I really want to, help to make this the best district in New York State. And it's going to take everybody in the school district, the community at large, our parents. So I have a collective style also in that I bring people to the table. I'm very interested to hear from people. That's what my listening tour was about. Very interested to hear from people what their vision is for the Buffalo Public Schools, because, they're stakeholders in this and they have a stake in this, especially our parents and our teachers.
How will you try to settle the teacher's contract? The last offer, I believe, made in March, about a 2.5% wage increase for teachers. I believe Union President Phil Moore called it a slap in the face. There's always been difficulty in trying to settle the teacher's contract. Is there anything different that you can bring to the table, again, from your experience in watching that through the years in the district? What can you do differently to settle that contract? And will you have enough money to give a fair wage increase to teachers, especially facing teacher shortages?
I can't say a whole lot about it. We're in the midst of negotiations. I will say, that for close to 10 years, I was a member of that constituent group. I was an officer with our administrators union. My uncle was the UAW president for Syracuse. I mean, I come from a unionized family. I understand why unions were created for fairness and equity. And I think that there really is no more important job in a school than being a teacher in front of children. I respect our teachers, and I want them to have fair wages. There's no question about that. I respect Mr. Ramore. He and I are in frequent communication. I'm hoping that we can get closer, together. It's a negotiation process. And so it can't just be, the way that the district says it will be, and it can't just be the way that the teachers union says it'll be. It's a negotiation, and we both have to give and take a little bit. So I'm hoping that we can get that settled. But so I've only been in this role for 4 months. We've settled 4 contracts. So I think that is, a demonstration of how committed I am to having contracts settled in our district.
How will you continue to help reach out to those children that were deeply affected by the top shooting on Jefferson Avenue? So many school students were in your community.
Yeah, that will be something I think for many years to come. Because again, just like McKinley, that was a dark day for the district. The top shooting, I think, was just a dark day for our country, for our entire country. And, we will ensure. I met with one of our strategic partners, Mr. Rust, David Rust, this week to share with him that we're going to need enhanced mental health supports in our schools. We are hiring additional student support staff. We are looking at trainings and support for our teachers and our teacher aides and our clerks, because we were all affected in one way, shape, or form. But what I have seen from that, this is called the Queen City, and we've got this thing we call Buffalo Love. And I have seen a pouring out of love and a bonding like I don't think I've ever seen before. People coming together of all races, of all socioeconomic statuses, to support and to help each other. We are having a day of hope and healing this coming Saturday, where we're giving out 3,000 backpacks filled with school supplies. We don't want our parents to have to worry about that. I've been going to different churches, and I'm just, I'm hearing the best of the best from people who are pulling together. I'm excited that TOPS has reopened. I hear it's beautiful, it's fantastic. I haven't been there yet. I do intend to go. But for our parents, if I can speak to them for a minute and just say that, we are preparing to make sure that the academic wellness is there for their children, the social emotional wellness will be there for them, the nutritional wellness. We want to make sure that our schools are an epicenter to make sure that our children, because there's nothing more important than ensuring that our children are well in this community. So we will be doing all that we can to make sure that happens.
Will that include, when you talk about adding more, hopefully mental health counselors and social workers, that American Rescue Plan that Dr. Cash had put out, it took some criticism. Some people weren't happy with how that $300 million in federal funding was being spent. Are you able to use that to help support those needs?
We absolutely are. We absolutely are using that monies just for those purposes, to make sure that our children have everything that they need. So, when I went out on the listening tour, I went to all different neighborhoods and I met with all, you know, different constituents of folks. And, the reason that it happened that way, I could have dispatched staff. I could have asked staff to go out, but I felt it was necessary for me to go out and to be able to look into the faces and for them to look into my face and for us to just have a conversation about what they wanted to see. And from that, what I promised them was that I would create a strategic plan where their voice would be seen in that plan. And so that's what's happening this summer. That strategic plan is being constructed. There were 5 big points. We took all of the data that we got and we disaggregated it. And there were 5 big points that we heard consistently, everywhere that we went. And so those will be in the strategic plan. We're working on transportation issues right now. We're a big school district, and we acknowledge that, with that comes challenges, but I'm not afraid of challenges. I am not afraid. You don't grow up in Buffalo, New York and be afraid of challenges, so I'm Buffalo strong, and we're trying to stay ahead of, some of the challenges that we're anticipating we could experience.
And finally, Superintendent, I know you are planning toward the end of the month a State of the Schools address. Can you give us a little synopsis of what you hope to unfold? I know you've covered a lot of territory with me in this interview. What can the community expect when they hear from you? And I think that's a great idea to hear what the State of the Schools is all about.
So we've never done a State of the Schools. I've been to a few of Mayor Brown's State of the City. I've seen State of the State, from our governors, but never the State of the Schools. And again, I guess, I'm, a little biased, but I feel like there's nothing more important than making sure that our children who are our future, are well. And I think it's important that from time to time, we share with the community where we are in the work and what the vision is. Otherwise, how can we expect for them to help us? And so, there are some things that we're going to be talking about in that State of the Schools address, like how do we eliminate opportunity gaps for children? So we hear all the time there are achievement gaps, amongst children. But I question, are there achievement gaps or are there opportunity gaps? And so we've got to try to address some of those opportunity gaps. How do we accelerate education for our children? We're working on an academic achievement plan right now so that the education will be meaningful. If you don't have a plan, then how do you ever get to where you're trying to get to? So you're going to hear about those things. You're going to hear about how we're prioritizing safety and wellness for all of our children. You'll hear about how we're trying to cultivate trust with this community. That's going to be critical for us to be able to move forward. So we want to amplify all voices. We're inviting all voices to the table, voices that normally are not. So when I'm at a table, I look around the table and make sure there's representation at that table. And finally, how are we going to connect our community into the classroom? We've got to be able to do that because, things like the arts, things like sports, things like mental health supports, we've got to have the community working with us so that we make sure that our children have everything they need. So those are really the 5 points that will be in the strategic plan. Those are the big pieces that I'll be talking about at our State of the Schools. We'll do it in different ways. We'll have some music, we'll have some students sharing some things, and we'll have some data, but those will be the focuses.
Dr. Tanja Williams, thank you so much, Superintendent of Buffalo, for sharing and answering all of our questions about the state of the schools. And we wish you the best of luck in your new role.
Thank you so much. Thank you.